Thank you very much for joining me one more time on AM Exclusive, and today we find ourselves in the residence of the man who helms or represents the biggest economy in Europe, right here in Ghana. We're going to have a conversation with him on everything from the economy to Europe's engagement on Russia, Ukraine, the Ghanaian election, and manifold matters. But joining me today on AM Exclusive, Daniel Krill, and I'm pleased to give him to you as we have this conversation. Hello.
Hi, Benjamin. Welcome, Akwaba, to the German residence, to you and your team and your viewers.
It's good to be here. I'm especially looking forward to this because I've known you to be one who has a no-holds-barred, disposition. So today, I'd like us to start off the conversation, though, talking about the history between Ghana and Germany, going all the way back to the 17th century and everything else from the the colonial era, and then from 1950 and what happened. But since the 2000s, the relationship has really taken off, and you've been in town for about, what, some 3 years already?
It has been 3 years now, yes. Please.
Right. How would you describe the relationship between Germany and Ghana in 2024?
Okay, I just was wondering if we go all the way back to the beginning of Christianity in West Africa. But no, I think let's call it the modern relations between Ghana and Germany, I think, started prominently in the 2000 with John Kufuor becoming president, and a very special relationship between John Kufuor and Horst Köhler, the IMF governor at the time. And ever since, I think, Ghana in the beginning of the Kufuor administration has been very instrumental in getting a deal done with the Ghana and the IMF about restructuring the debt at the time, and the same happened in recent years when we, as the one of the larger bilateral donors, also tried to be helpful in assisting Ghana in striking a deal with the IMF in order to resettle the debt issue here in the country.
Mm. And these have been very fruitful relations from what I've seen. But in terms of trade, for example, I have followed the patterns all the way till about 2022. It wouldn't be extremely huge, but there's a lot that is being done and a lot more that can be done. When you look at trade relations between our two countries, what do you see? What are the focal areas and how can they be made better?
I think the most striking thing is that the pattern is quite stable over time. Even during Corona days, the trade patterns were not very much impacted.
Right.
We, with the initiative of the Compact with Africa, we were hoping that Ghana would make important steps toward becoming a automotive country in the region. After several years, I'm afraid we have to know that not all expectations became a reality, and we are still missing important steps of policies to be taken that were promised at the time. We noticed that not only German but other car manufacturers are getting a little bit impatient, and I'm afraid that some momentum has been lost. So that would have been a big game changer in trade patterns.
I do know that Volkswagen is doing something in Ghana, is it not?
Yes, we are. Volkswagen is assembling cars that previously were produced in South Africa and then knocked down and then assembled in Ghana. This is a not unusual way of starting as an automotive nation, but we had hoped that more courageous policy measures would have been taken in order to encourage companies to invest, in particular, into the production of automotive parts.
I see. And would you say that since this agreement started, it's not just been Volkswagen, but other entities have come into the country? How fruitful has it been, building on that? And I pose that question on the back of Ghana from the independence era all through the 1970s. You know, there was a growing automobile industry. In fact, 2 popular vehicles were produced with Ghanaian names, right? And then it fizzled out at a point, and that was it. Do you feel Ghana can and should get to the point where we can build on such developments and maybe create a hub like Kenya, Tanzania, and some other countries have done in the automobile industry?
I mean, your question is tied to the future of the African continental free trade area. The automotive industry in general is very, very volume sensitive. So you need large markets in order to justify the investments that are needed to run a modern, competitive car manufacturing plan. Right. And 30 million alone just wouldn't do the trick. So you need to team up with the bigger countries in the region and try to build a solid unified economic area where these cars can be traded, whether they are Japanese, German, or Ghanaian built.
So that would be the logical next step.
Yeah, I mean there are some talks with between Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, but I mean we have been on this issue for several years now, and I'm afraid there's too little progress to be reported.
Too little progress. What would you say is leading to this lack of progress? Is it from our end? And I mean, what is impeding the process?
Well, the vested interest. So it's about custom duties for imported cars. If you are someone who wants to invest into car production in Ghana, you want to make sure that cars that are imported are imported with a certain duty. Right. There are many people who don't like that. You want to have a market for used cars that favors the reusing of your cars. Right. So if you are operating in a regime where overly used cars can be imported and still are allowed to drive in the streets of Accra, then you will have a hard time to sell your used car made in Ghana. So this plays all together, and there are vested interests on many sides, and this is what then takes place in Parliament, that these interests are acting against each other.
So vested interests, and you couldn't have put it any better. So push and pull factors, and you have to deal with that, and because of that, the process has sort of stagnated. But tell me, I'm also curious on the matter of trade, development, education. I remember all the way from the late 90s into the early 2000s, because I used to visit my aunt at the main office of WIAC. Now they have a different HQ, and I would pass through the German, enclave there. In terms of development, the GIZ and academic interactions, scholarships and all of that, the DAAD, how is that faring in Ghana?
Let's start with the second part of your question and the academic relations. We have a good news and a bad news. The good news is that we have a growing number of Ghanaians who are interested in going to Germany for study purposes. The downside is that the waiting list for visa is getting longer and longer, so that is very, very challenging.
Is that to say you've seen an uptick in numbers? Because
yes.
The Americans, for example, say that the number has tripled. Are you seeing same when it comes to Germany?
Not. I wouldn't say tripled, but it has increased in the last 2 to 3 years. And that is, of course, very, very encouraging, because that is the future base of bilateral relations, is the people who have been in the other country to make experience and learn and bring it back home. At the same time, Ghana is a very, very important regional hub for institutions funded by the German government. It looks at mathematics, it looks at environmental science, we have some important research activities since more than 30 years now with KNUST, the KCCR, and tropical medicine. So this is a huge field of bilateral cooperation, and this will drive the future cooperation more than any other element of our cooperation, more than development cooperation. You mentioned GIZ and GIZ.
Before you go to GIZ,
yes,
so a quick follow-up. I'm sure especially young people in Ghana will be interested in this question. While you say the number of applications have increased, have the numbers of visas being given out also increased?
Yes, the refusal rate is relatively moderate in our embassy. This has probably to do with certain barriers like language barriers. So only if you go to an English-speaking country, then everybody gives it a shot. But
right.
The idea of going to Germany, where they speak this weird language, maybe there's a certain threshold that.
So some level of proficiency, right?
Exactly. Which leads to the fact that the applications are a little bit more serious and professional than in other cases. That's a theory, it's not a proven fact. So. But this is how we try to, when we look for explanations, this is...
Right. Well, that reminds me of my days in class for my Eins. But anyway, let's get into your...
At the Goethe Institute.
Yes, at the Goethe Institute. And that was it. I left it there because
you loved that, right?
It was fantastic. But then I traveled to Cuba after that, and my Spanish just took over.
Okay.
So I have to get back to my German. I still have my books. Yeah. I have to get back to them. But let's talk about GIZ, Development Cooperation.
Yeah, I mean, Ghana, despite the fact that it is somewhere middle-income country these days, is a recipient of a huge amount of development cooperation over the last 8 to 10 years. The current portfolio amounts to more than 700 million, and the two major implementation agencies are GIZ and the KfW Bank. So they have a large portfolio to cover, and so they are very, very active in country and very well known around not only in the city center of Accra, but especially in the northern regions. I just was the other day in VAR.
I know they do quite a bit of work there.
Where they are very, very strong in the agricultural sector, trying to support and assist farmers in their challenge to cope with climate change. And they have been a trusted partner over time in that region.
Let's talk economy now. And even before we come into Ghana and the IMF, supported program and everything, I want to take you back to Germany. How is the biggest economy in Europe faring? And I do know that there has been a little bit of turbulence on the back of the war between Russia and Ukraine, and the positioning in recent times to support Ukraine with arms and everything that has come with it. But how is the biggest economy in Europe faring on the back of all that is going on?
You may call it smaller turbulences, but imagine that from one day to the other, the main source of energy for the Ghana industry is cut off, and that is what happened to Germany.
Russia threatened to do that, and they, I mean, by and large, and of course, when you also weaned yourself from
but
some of the
the
supplies.
experience until that date were with the Russian supplies on the energy sector were very reliable, despite all difficulties. The Russians always try to be a very trustworthy partner when it comes to energy supplies, but this time they just overstretched, and so we had to come up with the solutions. I think it went surprisingly well. Of course, there were peaks of energy prices. People were taking advantage, but predictions are now a little bit less stressful than the past. We embarked on a very ambitious road on energy transition. So we need to not only replace the gas supplies from Russia, but we also have to stay away in future times from coal. So we have to come up with dramatic investment into renewable energy. These days, the energy sometimes is already more than 50% from renewable energies. So it is a very, very ambitious proof of concept that we want to prove that even an industrialized country like Germany is capable of taking these courageous steps and making the economy much greener than in the past.
What lessons would you say Germany has learned from that experience with how things went?
I think we have learned that it's very complex and very challenging, and we are not done yet. As everybody knows, when you start increasing the percentage of renewable energies to your energy matrix, it becomes all much more flexible, and fluctuations are much higher. So you need a very, very smart grid to cope with this input, and still manage to have a stable energy supply. So that is very, very challenging, and more challenging even than our engineers have thought. And secondly, we are looking into green hydrogen, and that is, of course, a very complex challenge when it comes to infrastructure and so on. But I think there is a huge push in research, and there are some important research institutions who are really looking into the future in the industry, and there are interesting technologies coming up. And my line to the Ghanaians is always that something is happening out there, not only in Germany but around the globe. So new sources of energy are being tested and developed, and Ghana is well advised to look into this development and see what is in for Ghana.
Right, and that was the very next question I was going to come to, because if you consider, for example, the 1960s, the founder of Ghana, as I see it, and as we've had it, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he came forth with the idea and at least the concept of the Ghana Atomic Energy Commission. It never really took off. He was deposed and everything went downhill from there, even to today. What lessons can Ghana learn as far as energy is concerned from Germany and this phase you've been through over the last 2 years? I'm sure you know of our independent power producer situation and how much we have to pay, about the doomsaw and the new version of it, about trying to go solar in some places. How do you think we can benefit from learning from Germany?
Well, maybe it's not wise to only look at one country or Germany. I always like to refer to California, where renewable energy became very popular the moment when the house owner were allowed to put their solar panels up and sell the energy to the grid. That dramatically changed the entire landscape, and that's something I believe is also something that can then give a huge push to Ghana, and that, in my view, would be so much more obvious than looking into the possibility of becoming a nuclear energy producer, which I think, at least this is what the experts in my country are telling us. If you really take all costs into account, especially the cost of recycling of the plants and the fuels, then it becomes a very, very costly source of energy. So that is I think something Ghana could learn, and the view on energy has been dramatically changed by people who first opposed wind energy. they didn't like the idea that they would start and building these windmills around their village. Until the moment they were involved in the investment, so they became investors and they became beneficiaries,
exactly.
and were allowed to invest and to sell the energy. That totally changed their attitudes toward the new technologies. And as I said, I can imagine there are many options here in Ghana that can be tested.
Right. I guess it stands to reason. Once you beneficiate it, then people will want to latch on. And a good example would be the Dutch and how they've tapped into wind energy, for example. After this next question, I'll leave Europe and come predominantly to Ghana. But I just, out of curiosity, on the back of everything that has happened over the last 2 years plus between Russia and Ukraine, do you foresee that this war could come to some conclusion soon, especially now that Ukraine has made incursions in Russia?
Well, if you can read the mind of Mr. Putin, then you find the answer to your question.
But you're all pushing for peace, right?
Yes, we are, of course. I mean, we don't want this war. We never wanted the war. And it was Putin who started it, and it's Putin who can stop it. I'm afraid it's as simple as that. So whatever makes this gentleman to make the move towards peace will change the game. I think Europe is ready to but not at any price. I mean, it's this war was started to occupy territory of a sovereign country, and that is something the UN cannot accept, and Europe cannot accept. That someone tries by military force to rewrite the order of Europe.
All right, so latching on to that, you mentioned structures and other issues that have to be dealt with, but let's also contemplate that on the governance level, we've had a lot to deal with, even economically speaking. Inflation hit the roof at 54%, it's come down to about 20%. I don't want to talk about the exchange rate, which has flip-flopped. Our currency has faced issues. The IMF supported program and everything in between. When you look at how we have fared on the back of that, would you say we're making progress as our government is touting? And what more would you like to see in that regard?
Well, I would like to recall that Ghana was at one point very close to a meltdown, and Ghana, with the support of the IMF, was capable of containing this this threat of a total meltdown of the banking system and so on. Of course, there were painful measures to be implemented. I know friends who lost a lot of their savings due to the cuts in the domestic. Yes, so that was all very painful for many. But in the end, you can argue that at least the worst has been prevented from happening. So we should not forget that. Now, is this enough to move forward to come to new growth rates that are sufficient to feed a growing population? Probably not. So, but maybe you cannot do everything in one program. And so this was about stabilizing the financial sector, stabilizing the country. And that is, I think, has been done quite successfully. Still, there are structural issues that have to be overcome, but this is not something that can you just call the IMF and then it's done. But this is something that has to be worked on and cannot be solved overnight. And I mentioned structural issues with regard to food imports. You know, the fact that a country like Ghana, who has fertile soil, sun and water, imports 70% of all food items, it's quite unique, I'm afraid. And so
I think I have a better word. It's absurd. It's absurd.
That's your word. I would
well,
rather opt for it's a special case of.
I see you've put on your very diplomatic hat.
But this is in part it was also probably due to the fact that the currency of Ghana was quite highly valued. So maybe we are now coming more to more normal terms. We have now a central bank who is no longer wasting money in defending undefendable exchange rates. And
it's because on the back of the IMF program, they can't give money to government like they used to. But I'll just make this point. This wasn't a Ghana problem, as though Ghana were unique. COVID-19 hit the whole world, even the smallest of islands. The Russo-Ukrainian war, we were just talking about it, even Germany still, you're being affected by it. Some countries in the sub-region have fared better than others, including Ghana. Some countries have fared much better than we have. On the back of that, I would also rope in the latest Afrobarometer report and what it reveals about leadership across the board, how democracy is piping down, losing out, or losing currency in terms of support among people in Africa generally, and also especially here. In fact, a striking problem you would notice is that, especially in the countries that have gone the way of military rule, which nobody wants, by the way, there seems to be a lot more support for that, and the gains of democracy, or the preference for democracy, is reducing steadily. In one instance, I don't know whether it's Burkina Faso or Mali or another one of those countries, it declined by 40%. When you look at that, does it make you worried?
There are certainly questions raised that needs to be looked at, but I still believe in this wonderful line they're saying democracy might not be perfect, but it's still the best system I know. And what makes a democracy resilient against challenges is the support of all the citizens to this system to make it work. So yes, I can question parliamentarians who build their special economic model in a certain way, and I can criticize it. At the same time, as a voter, I also have to ask myself, am I maybe fueling certain patterns of behavior of certain politicians, because I'm always asking for things a member of parliament might not be responsible for. So I think it's always very easy to delegate the responsibility to the member of parliament, to the member of government, but at the same time it's also about the citizens, how actively and how ambitiously they are really asking their representatives to do their work. And I think it really depends on that you cannot let them go away with that, but you have to challenge them and ask them to work for the best interest of the country.
And well, there are times when even young people have poured onto the streets to call for that, more responsibility. But we have a bit of a curious and convoluted... Go ahead.
Now, the other day I was surprised. The photographer had told me that you have to help us. I said, why do I have to help you? Yeah, you have to help Ghana and you have to give us money. Well, why do I have to give you money? Well, we have to pay demonstrators to go into the street and demonstrate.
Who was telling you this?
A photographer. So I said, wait a minute, so aren't you going to for demonstrations because you're demonstrating for your own interest? But this is exactly what I'm referring to. It's this attitude that you have to a system like democracy.
Well, I don't know about that photographer. He may be the odd one out. But I was also going to look at the question about the curious nature or convoluted nature of development, and maybe why we're here. Because members of parliament technically are not supposed to be agents of development, so to speak, even per our constitution. The district chief executives at the assembly level as well, they are supposed to be in charge of it. Unfortunately, that is not working as it ought to. The district assembly common fund is not working as it ought. That is how, through some means, members of parliament are now agents in a way, being lobbied and all of that. So maybe that's another, a discussion for another day. But when you look at our brand of democracy, our fledgling democratic experiment, it's been some 32 years. I look at the canon system in Switzerland. I look at Germany and how you go about it, the base of development. When you look at Ghana, would you say 32 years on, we could be doing better than where we are now?
You mean the last 32 years? Or,
yes, since 1992 when we started this.
I'm a humble ambassador. How can I judge? I think Ghana is a sovereign state. They found their solution at the time, and this is about democracy. You have to negotiate your solutions every day again. It's not that you take the decision and leave it to a ruler and then he will dictate where Ghana has to go through. It's about negotiating every day again the compromises the people want to and are willing to subscribe. It's
on the back of that, there are some people who say our constitution needs urgent review. In fact, in the year 2010, we had a Constitutional Review Commission set up. They did their work, very voluminous. It's gathering dust. What do you make of that? I mean, look at the German example, for example.
I mean, that's a very fruitful debate, but I know very different views on this. I had this wonderful morning meeting with some smart people from Ghana. We were discussing about the concentration of power in the hands of one, and that might be a major problem, because then decision making is bottlenecked, and so everybody said, no, we need decentralization, this and that. Everybody said that except one. And at one point, everybody was pointing to him. So you haven't said anything. Why not? He said, I totally disagree. I totally disagree.
Is this person in authority?
Yes, he said, imagine we had the right leader. He was then later referring to Lee Kuan Yew from Singapore.
Right.
We would need exactly this kind of constitution to make sure that the necessary reforms can be implemented swiftly. Right. So there's more than one view on reform.
What do you think? Is it the concentration of power that works, or the devolution of power so that one person doesn't become too powerful? Because you remember Lord Acton's aphorism, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. When Barack Obama came to Ghana, he said, we don't need strong men, we need strong institutions. That person is saying we need strong men. It has worked for Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew. Would it necessarily work for us? That's another question altogether.
Yeah, it's Ghana has to find its way. It's not on me to write a recipe. It's about the Ghanaians to discuss this question, which is I think a very challenging one, and very tempting for people to discuss that, and right. to always to recalibrate your political system, and that I think is the charm of democracy. You know, that you have the institutions in place that you can constantly refine the way of decision making in your society.
Right. Let's talk about, let's stay on democracy, because we're entering our 8th electoral cycle since 1992. There have been 2 changes of power on an 8-year basis, 1992 to 2000, or 93 better still, to 2000, then 2000 to 2008, 2008 to 2016, and now 2016 to 2024. We're at the crossroads again. What, as German ambassador to Ghana, are you expecting to see before, during, and after election 2024, especially as there have been 2 election petitions, and I'm sure you've listened to the tenor, the language that has been used, especially by the major political parties, the MPP in power and the NDC. What will be your expectations, even before we get into how the parties are conducting themselves?
Well, since Ghana returning to democracy, the Ghanaian people have proven that they have taken very good care of the transition of power, and that they every 8 years managed to have this handing over. And I don't expect anything less than that the Ghanaian people will make sure that their vote, that their decision on the date of election will be respected and implemented. And Ghana has a proven record and that they have been able to manage these challenging times, and they will do the same thing again. I personally believe there will be we will probably have a second round of elections, which I'm surprised that Ghanaians are not so much preparing for.
And you forecast, when you look into your crystal ball, you think there could be a runoff.
Yeah, I mean, it's my first election in Ghana, so I'm a greenhorn, and my good friends tell me that I'm a greenhorn and that I should be more careful. But I think there are some good arguments to expect that there might be a second round. You mentioned some interventions which make me think of times in the United States electoral process when Mr. Trump states that he will never accept defeat. I think Democrats need to have a different attitudes that would be very would show a disrespect to the voters. Not to accept any decisions the voters will take. So I would expect from any democratic leader to honor the outcome of the election.
Are you trying to say that, and I'll just read some of the commentary for you shortly, but are you trying to say that even in the United States, probably one of the biggest bastions of democracy globally, Trump said something he didn't want to hand over, tried every means. Even Mike Pence, his vice president, went ahead and signed off. The system prevailed. And so he couldn't sustain that. The system pushed him out, even though the rhetoric had been never, never, never. Is that what you're saying? That no matter what happens, even if there's a pushback, the system should prevail?
But the rules of the game should prevail, yes, of course.
Right.
And I mean, we both know that it was very close call at the time in the United States. And I think that me, like many others, were surprised on how quickly these institutions, which were perceived as being so powerful, were being played with and played against. And so, and as you rightly said, this happened in a country that was known for very strong, solid, and independent-minded institutions. Not every country is like that, and so there's a stronger set of values in institutions like in others, and so it's. It needs strong institution, but it also needs democratically committed leaders who accept the decision of the electorate.
All right. Even before I get to some of these comments, very recently we heard the chairman of the National Democratic Congress say that, usually there'll be some peace pact, a declaration they sign that we're going to maintain the peace. You do recall that in the last election, 8 lives were lost in 2020. We're trying to avoid a repeat because who knows what that could stoke. And he said it's not just in the signing of peace pacts, and so we are not interested in that. It's about doing the right things so that we don't have to get there. That rhetoric in itself is problematic. On the back of that, at the recent launch of the MPP's manifesto, then there is talk about, oh, we'll also not sacrifice, the elections on the altar of peace. In other words, saying, okay, to hell with peace, and we have to do what it takes, whatever it takes. Then you come to also recent comments by the Agric Minister, Brian Champong. He says, it will never happen that we, the MPP, will stand on a platform to hand over power to the NDC. If the NDC dares to resort to threats, violence, and imprudence during the 2024 election, we will demonstrate our strength. What strength, we don't know. We'll show them that we are well prepared. And he repeats, last year I said this, blah, 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 and he says, and therefore the MPP will not hand over power to them because they cannot win the elections. The former president has come in to say, you don't determine who wins the elections. If the people vote for me, you will have to hand over to me, speaking to the president. On the other side, an NDC member, Malik Basintali, also comes in and says, he dares to say, that is Brian Champong dares to say he will not hand over to us. If he is truly a man, let him refuse to hand over power and he will see what happens. When iron meets iron, you will see fire. The National Peace Council, the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference, CSOs, many people have been concerned about this rhetoric which raises tensions. From where you sit in the diplomatic community, what can be done to ensure that we don't go the way of Venezuela, that we have peaceful elections, and that what is right is done, the will of the people is accepted?
To start with Venezuela, I see Venezuela far away from Ghana. So let's boil it down.
I use Venezuela on the basis of the will of the people, supposedly, not being accepted. That's the point there. And the US, Argentina, and others have corroborated that. So that is the point on Venezuela.
Yeah, maybe you came across the fact that I was posted in Venezuela at some point in my career, and so I know how far away this so-called democratic system of Venezuela is compared to the well-established, well-proven system in Ghana that over the 90 years was capable of ensuring that the will of the people was implemented. I'm afraid certain of these statements might be done in order to catch attention in the runoff to the elections and so on. I share people who are concerned. I don't think it is wise to put oil into the fire if you want to distinguish the fire. So I think every democratic-minded leader and candidate should take this into account. And again, it's on the people to make sure that their vote is respected. And there, I think I'm pretty confident that the Ghanaians will not allow anybody, whoever it is, to take away their decision. And there are many ways how election results are scrutinized, and I think the system is quite well established that major fraud, impactful fraud is almost excluded. So I think Ghanaians are a very peaceful-minded country, and the overwhelming majority of this country wishes peaceful, fair, and transparent elections, and they will make sure that they will enjoy these kind of elections.
The international community usually comes in to observe and all of that. How actively is Germany going to be a part of that in terms of observing election 2024?
Yeah, we have mainly three pillars in how we try to contribute to what I just described as the the effort of the people of Ghana to make sure that they have this peaceful, fair, and transparent elections. First of all, we're financing security courses to coordinate security agencies in the run-off to elections in order to be able to experience and cope with what they call electoral violence. We did this in Accra, Kumasi, Tamale, and other places. We are engaging and financing seminars for journalists about fact-checking techniques. And finally, we will register some of our my team members will register as we will be out there on election day and support Ghanaian people in their effort to observe the election. So make sure that everything runs.
Will you personally be out there on election day?
Yes, I will be.
All right, interesting. I'll look out for you. Before we conclude, let's also talk about current projects that Germany has going on in Ghana. And after that, I'll come through with two very light questions, interesting ones. But current projects, anything you'd like to talk about? Germany in Ghana and what you're up to?
The most exciting is a very relatively small one. It's about green hydrogen. Bui Power is in negotiations with a research institute in Germany to set up a small pilot green hydrogen electrolyzer, which will enable Bui Power to combine green hydrogen and their hydropower and provide a 24-hour source of energy. That's a small pilot, but I strongly believe in small, and then you grow.
I like what you believe in small, huh?
Yes, I believe in small, and then you build. Well, once you have proven that the concept works, then you build on it. And as I mentioned earlier, I strongly believe that there are some very exciting opportunities for Ghana and new fuels if it comes to fuel for airlines and aircrafts. When it comes for the shipping industry, there's so much changing. So I like very much this pilot project, and I hope that it will be that the kickoff will start before I leave the country.
I see. All right. I was about to ask about timelines, but now you're saying you hope it will start before you leave the country. So I don't know whether you're getting another term, whether you're going to be in Ghana for much longer.
I will be here through the elections and until July next year.
Okay. All right. I'd like to find out, what's your favorite Ghanaian food?
Really? It's palava sauce. I die for palava sauce.
I see.
Yes.
What do you take it with?
With the usual
yam, rice. I mean, there are people.
Please, with the yam and the plantain. And,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
I enjoy very much.
Maybe one of these days I'd invite you for lunch and would have some.
Your private palava recipe.
Maybe.
Okay.
We'd try.
All right.
We'd try. But moving on from there, the very final bit before I take your final words. I know you love the piano. Are you very musical? Did you grow up playing any instrument?
Well, I grew up playing piano and the clarinet, and
I see. How young were you?
I started when I was 8 years. Yeah, I started with piano. And my mother was very strict, very strict. She never played an instrument herself, but she insisted that all of her 4 children had to play an instrument. So. There were times where I hated it, and now today I'm very happy that I have this moment for myself where I can really relax and play music, either classical music or some jazz or some.
Who's your favorite, should I say, in terms of the masters of the piano, or those who, I've just forgotten the name, those who write these different, who's your favorite?
I think when it comes to classical music, it's Beethoven.
Okay.
And
I see a bit of a bias there, but yes.
Slightly.
Okay, Beethoven. Yeah. All right, so I guess in your spare time you would play this, calm yourself. Are you teaching your children to do the same?
No, I did not. They are now 28 and 30 years old, so I missed my chance.
You didn't do that with them.
The mother to my children always said it's my job to teach them an instrument. I was most of the time not around during daytime, so that was I missed that. Yes.
Well, sorry about that. Any final words for us?
Well, I wish Ghana all the best for coming elections, and that they are defending their vote, and that they will be enjoying fair, peaceful elections.
Well, thank you very much for joining the conversation today on AM Exclusive. It's been insightful, and I look forward to seeing you having a discussion maybe in 2025 post our elections.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And this has been our engagement on AM Exclusive with Daniel Krull, the German ambassador to Ghana. He's been gracious enough to welcome us into his home, his residence here. This has been Benjamin Akakpo on The Beat today. Thank you for watching.